Hello everyone, welcome to Full Moon Movies. The Big Hit, released in 1988, sits at an interesting crossroads in Hong Kong action cinema. It carries the raw energy of the late 80s genre filmmaking while also hinting at the more controlled, morally complex crime films that Johnnie To would later become known for. Watching it today through the Shaw Factory release, the film doesn't feel like a polished statement piece. In fact, it feels like a snapshot of an industry in motion, discovering new rhythms of violence, loyalty, and consequence. The story follows a police officer drawn into a conflict that quickly moves beyond procedure and into something far more personal. This isn't a narrative built around clever twists or mystery box plotting. Instead, it's driven by pressure, a pressure from the streets, from criminal organizations, and from the quiet expectations placed on men who operate in violent systems. The film's strength is not in complexity, but in momentum. Every decision pushes the characters further into confrontation, and every confrontation leaves something behind that can't be undone. Now, what stands out is how the film treats duty and obsession. The protagonist isn't motivated by heroism in the abstract, but by a tightening sense that there is no safe distance left between his professional role and his personal life. Now, the line between work and identity erodes scene by scene. This is a common theme in Hong Kong action cinema of the era. But the Big Hit handles it with a certain directness, less poetic than later Johnnie To works, but with more urgent and physical. Violence in the film is blunt and kinetic. Gunfights are staged not as elegant choreography, but as eruptions, chaotic, noisy, and destabilizing. The camera often stays close to the action, emphasizing confusion rather than clarity. Now, this creates a feeling that no one is truly in control, even when they think they are. The action isn't there to impress, it's there to exhaust, and in that exhaustion, the film finds its emotional weight. The villains are not framed as mythic figures, but as functional ones, such as people who run systems, enforce fear, and understand leverage. Now, there is no grand ideology here, only power and the need to maintain it. Now, this gives that conflict a grounded quality. The danger doesn't come from a single mastermind, but from an environment where violence is simply how problems are managed. One of the most interesting aspects of The Big Hit is how it reflects a transitional moment in Hong Kong cinema. You can feel the influence of heroic bloodshed films in its emphasis on loyalty, sacrifice, and masculine codes of honor, but you also can sense a shift towards something more colder and more procedural. I would say that the emotional beats are still bold, but they're increasingly shaped by systems rather than pure personal tragedy. Now, visually, the film is practical and functional. The city is not romanticized, it's a space of movement, transactions, and threat. Interiors feel cramped, exteriors feel exposed, and the geography of scenes reinforces the idea that there is nowhere to stand that isn't already compromised. The Shaw Factory presentation preserves this texture really very well. The grain, the contrast, and the slightly rough edges all contribute to the film's physical, lived-in quality. Sound design and music serves the rhythm of the story rather than trying to elevate it into operatic territory. Gunshots are sharp, impacts are heavy, and silence is used to reset tension rather than to romanticize mood. The film really understands pacing as pressure. Build, release, and then build again, with less and less room to breathe each time. Now, what makes The Big Hit compelling in retrospect is not that it's a definitive of Johnnie To films, it isn't, but that it shows a filmmaker and an industry in the process of refining that language. You can see the seeds of later thematic interests such as institutions versus individuals, the cost of loyalty, the machinery of violence. Here, those ideas are expressed in a kind of rougher, more direct form, but that rawness is part of the film's identity. Now, as a narrative experience, the film doesn't aim for ambiguity or philosophical distance. It in fact moves forward with purpose, and that purpose is confrontation. Characters don't really debate their choices for long, they live with them. Consequences arrive quite quickly and they are rarely reversible. Now, this gives a story a sense of inevitability that keeps it grounded even when the action really escalates. From a modern viewing perspective, The Big Hit benefits from being approached not as a polished classic, but as a strong genre from rooted in its time. For example, its energy, its bluntness, and its focus on momentum over introspection makes it a revealing piece of Hong Kong action cinema history. The Shout Factory release allows that context to be appreciated rather than smoothed over. Near to its release, the film like this were part of a crowded and highly competitive industry where box office success really depended on much of the star power and the timing as and craftsmanship. Now, the big hit found its place within that ecosystem as a solid, hard-hitting entry rather than a genre-defining phenomenon. Now, some viewers today may find its storytelling more straightforward than later, which is more stylized crime films. But that simplicity is also what makes it honest. Seen now, The Big Hit works best as a film about pressure, professional, emotional, and physical. It's what actually happens when roles becomes identities, when systems leave no space for retreat, and when violence becomes the only remaining language. It really doesn't offer moral comfort or poetic distance. It in fact offers movement, impact, and the sense of a world that keeps tightening around its characters. Now, as a Shout Factory 4K viewing experience, the film's grit and immediacy are preserved rather than polished away. It is not about visual luxury, it's about texture, atmosphere, and presence. And in that form, The Big Hit stands as a reminder of a period when Hong Kong action cinema was forging its modern identity. One gunshot, one chase, and one hard decision at a time. Now, ultimately, The Big Hit endures not because it perfects the genre, but because it captures it in motion. It shows a cinema learning how to express speed, loyalty, and consequence through action, and it does so with a directness that still carries weight today. Now, this movie is a must watch.